The morning sun filtered through the blinds of a small two-bedroom apartment on the west side of Chicago. Dishes from last night's dinner still sat in the sink, and a stack of bills lay scattered across the kitchen table. A young woman in her mid-20s stood at the counter, hurriedly making a sandwich for her teenage brother's lunchbox. Dark circles under her eyes told the story of another night with too little sleep. "Don't forget your science textbook this time," she called out, glancing at the clock. "And remember, I'm working a double shift tonight, so heat up the lasagna I left in the fridge." Her brother appeared in the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder. At 16, he was all gangly limbs and untamed hair, a growth spurt having added 4 inches to his height in the last year alone. I know, he mumbled, grabbing the lunch she'd prepared. "You don't have to baby me, Liz." Elizabeth Chen, Liz to those who knew her, gave her brother a tired smile. "Someone's got to, kiddo." 2 years ago, their parents had been returning from a weekend trip when their car hit a patch of black ice. The accident had changed everything. Liz had been a sophomore at Juilliard then, her entire life revolving around the piano and dreams of concert halls. Now at 24, her reality was double shifts at Bellini's Italian restaurant, utility bills, and making sure her brother made it to school on time. "I left money on the counter in case you want to order pizza with your friends," she added, rinsing her coffee mug in the sink. "Thanks." Her brother paused at the door. "Hey, you should play something before work. Might make you feel better." Liz's eyes drifted to the upright piano pushed against the living room wall, their mother's piano, the one she had learned to play on as a child. A thin layer of dust covered the closed lid. She couldn't remember the last time she'd opened it. "Maybe tomorrow," she said, the same answer she gave every time. "I've got to get ready for work." After her brother left, Liz showered quickly and changed into her work uniform. Black slacks, white button-up shirt, black tie. Her fingers worked automatically, tying her long dark hair into a neat bun at the nape of her neck. She caught her reflection in the bathroom, mirror, and barely recognized the person staring. Beck, the girl who had once spent hours practicing Chopin and Rachmaninoff, was hidden somewhere, beneath the weight of responsibility. Sometimes when she cleared tables or delivered plates of pasta to demanding customers, she would hear music in her head, complex melodies and harmonies that her fingers itched to play. But those moments were fleeting, quickly replaced by the reality of counting tips and calculating whether they'd make rent that month. Bellini's was a 20-minute bus ride from their apartment. The restaurant sat in the heart of downtown Chicago, its brick exterior and gold-lettered sign promising an authentic Italian experience. Inside, white tablecloths and soft lighting created an atmosphere of understated elegance. In one corner stood a baby grand piano, a beautiful instrument that mostly served as decoration, except on Friday and Saturday nights when they hired a pianist. "You're early," noted the hostess, a college student named Penny, as Liz walked through the door. "Bus came on time for once," Liz replied, making her way to the back room to clock in and grab her apron. "How's the lunch crowd looking?" "Pretty quiet so far." "Oh, but heads up. Mr. Romano's on the warpath about something. The delivery was late this morning." Liz nodded, tying her apron strings. Mr. Romano, the restaurant owner, was a perfectionist with a short temper. Most days she managed to stay off his radar by working efficiently and keeping quiet. The lunch shift passed in the usual blur of taking orders, delivering food, and clearing tables. Liz moved on autopilot, her mind often elsewhere. While refilling water glasses at table 7, she found herself mentally playing Debussy's Clair de Lune, her fingers subtly moving as if pressing invisible keys. "Excuse me, miss?" A customer's voice snapped her back to reality, and she realized she'd been pouring water dangerously close to the rim of the glass. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly, pulling the pitcher away. By the time the dinner shift began, Liz's feet were already aching. She'd only had 15 minutes to sit down and eat a quick sandwich between shifts. The restaurant had transformed from its quiet lunchtime lull to a bustling dinner service. Every table was reserved, unusual for a Thursday night. "What's going on?" she asked Tony, one of the other servers, as they both waited at the service station for their orders. "Private event in the back room," he explained, loading drinks onto his tray. "Some hotshot music producer is having a birthday dinner. Mr. Romano's been in a state all day getting everything perfect." Liz felt a small pang at the mention of music producer. In another life, she might have been excited about such a guest, might have even found an excuse to introduce herself. Now it was just another detail that made her workday more hectic. Her section filled quickly, and soon she was juggling multiple tables, memorizing special requests, and running back and forth to the kitchen. The head chef was in a foul mood, shouting at the line cooks and sending back dishes that didn't meet his standards. Just before 8 o'clock, Mr. Romano appeared at her elbow while she was entering an order into the computer system. "Chen," he said, his voice low and urgent, "I need you to cover tables 12 through 15 as well. Joey called in sick and we're short-staffed." Liz felt her heart sink. She was already managing 6 tables. Adding 4 more would be nearly impossible, especially on a busy night like this, "But sir, No excuses," he cut her off. "This is an important night for the restaurant. That man in the private room spends more in one dinner than most people do in a month. Everything needs to be perfect." Before she could protest further, he was gone, barking orders at one of the busboys. Liz took a deep breath, mentally recalculating how she would handle the additional tables. For the next hour, she was in constant motion, smiling through her exhaustion, apologizing for slight delays and trying to keep all her orders straight. Her back ached from carrying heavy trays and a dull headache was forming behind her eyes. As she hurried past the piano corner, a melody drifted through her mind. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the piece her mother had taught her when she was just 8 years old. For a moment Liz paused, her gaze lingering on the instrument. Its polished surface gleamed under the restaurant lights and she could almost feel the smooth keys beneath her fingertips. "Hurry up with those drinks." Someone called from the bar, breaking the spell. By 9:30, the private party in the back room was getting rowdy. Liz could hear bursts of laughter and the occasional raised voice. She wasn't assigned to that section but had glimpsed the guest of honor when delivering a tray of appetizers to a nearby table. A middle-aged man with salt and pepper, hair and an expensive watch that caught the light when he gestured. She was carrying a tray of desserts when she overheard Mr. Romano speaking in hushed, urgent tones with the maître d'. "What do you mean he's not coming?" Mr. Romano hissed. "We specifically arranged for a pianist tonight."
"He called 10 minutes ago," the maître d' replied.
"Food poisoning," he says. "Can't get out of bed." Mr. Romano ran a hand through his thinning hair, glancing nervously toward the private room. "This is a disaster. Mr. Winters specifically requested live piano music for after dinner. He's a music producer, for God's sake. How will it look if we can't provide that?" Liz felt a strange flutter in her stomach as she moved past them, pretending not to hear. The piano. The music producer. It was as if the universe was playing some cruel joke, dangling her past life in front of her. Throughout her shift, Liz had been humming classical pieces under her breath without even realizing it, a habit from her days of constant practice. As she delivered a tiramisu to an elderly couple, she caught herself softly humming Mozart's Turkish March. "That's lovely, dear," the woman commented. "Do you sing professionally?" Liz blushed, embarrassed to have been caught. "No, just a hobby," she said quickly, turning to leave. As the evening wore on, she noticed Mr. Romano becoming increasingly agitated, checking his watch and peering anxiously at the baby grand. The music producer, Mr. Winters, she'd heard, had emerged from the private room several times, his gaze also drifting to the silent piano. Liz kept her head down and focused on her tables. The last thing she needed was to get involved in whatever crisis was unfolding. She had her own problems to worry about. Her brother's upcoming dentist appointment that insurance wouldn't fully cover, the electric bill that had just arrived with an unexpectedly high balance, the essay she still needed to write for her night school class. But each time she passed the piano, her steps slowed almost imperceptibly. Her fingers, carrying plates and glasses, remembered a different purpose, and somewhere deep inside, behind the exhaustion and worry, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, some dreams weren't meant to stay buried forever. The tension in the restaurant grew as the evening progressed. Liz noticed Mr. Romano pacing near the entrance, phone pressed to his ear as he desperately called other pianists who might be available on short notice. Each time his expression darkened further. "No luck?" the maitre d' asked when Mr. Romano ended yet another call. "Everyone's already booked," he muttered, loosening his tie slightly. "It's Thursday night, all the decent pianists in Chicago are working." Liz tried to focus on her own tasks. Table 14 needed their check. Table 13 was complaining about their wine being too warm, and she still had 3 dessert orders to deliver. But as she moved through her section, she kept glancing at the piano, its silent presence now the center of an unfolding drama. Around 10 o'clock, the door to the private room swung open and Mr. Winters emerged, followed by several well-dressed guests. The music producer was taller than Liz had initially realized, with broad shoulders and a commanding presence that made nearby diners look up from their meals. He scanned the restaurant with the air of someone used to being catered to, his eyes eventually landing on the empty piano. "Romano," he called out, his voice carrying across the dining room. "I thought we discussed this. Where's the pianist?" Mr. Romano hurried over, apologies already spilling from his lips. "Mr. Winters, I cannot express how deeply sorry I am. Our regular pianist called in sick, and despite my best efforts—" "I don't want to hear excuses," Mr. Winters cut him off. "This is my birthday celebration, and I specifically requested music. My guests are expecting it." The restaurant had grown quieter, other diners sensing the confrontation. Liz, carrying a tray of coffee cups, tried to make herself invisible as she passed nearby. "Perhaps we could play some recorded music," Mr. Romano suggested weakly. Mr. Winters let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Recorded music? In a place like this? I might as well have held my party at a chain restaurant." One of his guests, a woman in a sleek black dress, placed a hand on his arm. "Vincent, it's fine. We're having a wonderful time regardless." But Vincent Winters didn't appear to be listening. His gaze had shifted from Mr. Romano to the baby grand, then swept across the restaurant as if searching for something or someone. "There must be somebody here who can play," he said, addressing the room at large now. "Anyone. Even just a few simple tunes would suffice." The other diners looked away uncomfortably, suddenly very interested in their plates. A few servers, including Tony, had stopped to watch the scene unfold. Liz, who had been heading back to the kitchen, quickened her pace, hoping to escape before— "You there!" "Waitress with the coffee tray." Liz froze mid-step. Surely he wasn't talking to her. "Yes, you," Mr. Winters continued. "Turn around, please." Slowly, Liz turned to face him, careful not to spill the coffee cups on her tray. "Me, sir? I've noticed you humming all evening," he said, taking a step toward her. "Classical pieces, unless I'm mistaken. Beethoven, Mozart." "Do you play?" The question hung in the air between them. Liz felt heat rising to her cheeks as she became aware of everyone watching. Mr. Romano with an expression of surprise, her fellow servers with curiosity, the restaurant patrons with interest. "I used to," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Mr. Romano's eyebrows shot up. In the 2 years she'd worked at Bellini's, Liz had never mentioned her musical background. She'd kept that part of her life carefully separated from her present reality. "Well, that settles it," Mr. Winters announced as if the matter were decided. "You'll play for us." "Oh no, I couldn't possibly," Liz said quickly, panic rising in her chest. "I haven't played in years. And I'm working. I have tables." "We can cover her tables," Mr. Romano interjected, suddenly seeing a solution to his problem. "Chen, why didn't you ever tell me you were a pianist?" "Because I'm not. Not anymore." The tray in her hands felt impossibly heavy. "Mr. Romano, please." "I really can't." "Nonsense," Mr. Winters said, waving away her protests. "It's like riding a bicycle. You never truly forget." He turned to Mr. Romano. "I'm sure you can spare her for 30 minutes. Mr. Romano nodded eagerly. Of course. Tony can take over her section." He gestured to one of the other servers, who looked less than thrilled at the prospect of additional tables. "I really don't think—" Liz tried again, but Mr. Romano was already taking the coffee tray from her hands. "Just a few pieces," he said quietly, his expression making it clear this wasn't a request. "Mr. Winters is our most important customer. Do this for the restaurant, Chen. Please." Liz felt trapped, caught between her desire to keep her past and present separate and the clear expectation that she would comply. Her heart raced as Mr. Winters gestured toward the piano with a sweep of his arm. "After you," he said, the hint of a challenge in his voice. With leaden feet, Liz walked toward the instrument, aware of every eye in the restaurant following her. The distance felt both too short and endless. As she approached, she could see her reflection distorted in the polished black surface. A waitress still in uniform, about to expose a part of herself she'd kept hidden for so long. The piano bench felt foreign beneath her as she sat down. She stared at the keys, ivory and ebony stretching before her like a road leading back to her old life. Her hands hovered uncertainly, trembling slightly. "What should I play?" she asked, her voice small, not looking up. "Whatever comes to mind," Mr. Winters replied, now standing beside the piano. "Impress me." The pressure of the moment, the watching crowd, Mr. Romano's desperate expression, Mr. Winters' challenging tone, made Liz's mind go blank. For a terrible moment, she couldn't remember a single piece. Then, almost of their own accord, her fingers lowered to the keys and found the opening notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune, the piece that had been in her head earlier that day. The first chord resonated through the restaurant, and Liz felt a jolt, like touching a live wire. How long had it been since she'd felt that connection? The initial notes were tentative, her fingers stiff from disuse. But as the gentle melody began to take shape, something shifted. Her hands remembered what her mind had tried to forget. Years of practice, of discipline, of losing herself in the music. By the time she reached the flowing middle section, her initial nervousness had faded. The restaurant around her seemed to dissolve. She was no longer aware of Mr. Winters watching, or Mr. Romano's relieved expression, or the curious stares of the other diners. There was only the music, the gentle rises and falls, the delicate arpeggios, the space between the notes. When the final chord faded, Liz remained still, hands resting lightly on the keys. For a moment, complete silence filled the restaurant. Then someone began to applaud, followed by another, and soon the entire dining room joined in. Startled back to reality, Liz looked up to find Mr. Winters studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. His applause was measured, deliberate. "Not bad," he said when the clapping subsided. "A bit rusty, perhaps, but there's something there. Play something else, something with more fire." The command in his tone irked Liz. Who was he to demand performances, to judge her playing when she hadn't asked for his assessment? Yet the piano beneath her fingers called to her. Now that she'd broken her self-imposed silence, she found herself wanting to play again. Without consciously deciding, she launched into Chopin's Revolutionary Etude, a piece that had once been her showstopper at recitals. The dramatic opening cascades poured out, her left hand racing up and down the keyboard with growing confidence. This was not the gentle dreaminess of Debussy, but a storm of notes, requiring technical precision and emotional intensity. Mr. Romano's jaw dropped. Other servers had stopped their work to listen, trays held forgotten in their hands. Even the kitchen staff had emerged, standing in the doorway to witness what was happening. As Liz played, something inside her broke open, a dam holding back years of suppressed passion. Her fingers flew across the keys with increasing assurance, finding their old strength and agility. The music surged through the restaurant, commanding attention, telling the story of revolution, of struggle, of triumph. When she finally struck the powerful final chords, she was breathing hard as if she'd been running. Sweat beaded on her forehead, and her heart pounded in her chest. The silence that followed lasted only a second before the restaurant erupted in applause. Not polite appreciation this time, but genuine enthusiasm. Someone whistled. An elderly man at a corner table rose to his feet, followed by others until much of the dining room was standing. Mr. Winters remained seated, but his expression had changed. The challenging smirk was gone, replaced by something Liz couldn't quite read, surprise perhaps, or reassessment. "Where did you study?" he asked when the applause died down. Liz hesitated, then answered truthfully. "Juilliard, for a year and a half." Murmurs spread through the nearby tables. Juilliard. The name carried weight, even among those who knew little about classical music. "And now you're here serving pasta," Mr. Winters observed, his tone unreadable. "Interesting career trajectory." The comment stung, reopening a wound that had never fully healed. Liz stood abruptly, smoothing her apron with shaking hands. "If you'll excuse me, I need to get back to work," she said, her voice tight. "I hope that was sufficient entertainment for your birthday." As she stepped away from the piano, she felt lighter and heavier all at once, lighter for having reconnected, however briefly, with the music she loved, heavier with the weight of confronting what she'd lost. Liz tried to return to her work, but everything had changed. As she moved through the restaurant, collecting dishes and delivering checks, Customers watched her with new eyes. Some smiled or nodded in recognition. Others whispered to their companions as she passed. A few even reached out to touch her arm, offering compliments that made her uncomfortable. That was extraordinary. Are you a professional? I've never heard Chopin played with such feeling. She answered with brief thanks, keeping her head down, wishing she could disappear. The attention felt like an ill-fitting coat, once familiar but now too tight, too heavy. In the kitchen, the staff's reaction was mixed. Some, like Penny the hostess, were genuinely impressed. "Why didn't you ever tell us you could play like that?" she asked, eyes wide. "You're amazing." Others seemed almost resentful, as if Liz had been hiding a secret identity. "So what, you're some kind of piano genius slumming it with us regular folks?" Tony remarked as they stood at the service station. His tone was joking, but Liz caught the edge beneath his words. "It's in the past," she said firmly, arranging dessert plates on her tray. "Let's just forget about it, okay?" But forgetting wasn't possible. Mr. Romano now looked at her differently, calculating like she was a resource he hadn't properly utilized. Several times during the remainder of her shift, she caught him watching her, as if seeing her for the first time. Worst of all was Mr. Winters. The music producer hadn't returned to his private room after her performance. Instead, he'd taken a seat at a small table near the piano, occasionally glancing in her direction. When she passed his table, he would ask casual questions that felt like tests. "Who was your teacher at Juilliard? Have you played any competitions? What happened that made you leave?" Liz answered as briefly as possible, trying to maintain a professional demeanor while feeling increasingly exposed. It was like having a scab picked off a wound she'd thought was healing. By midnight, most of the customers had left. Liz was wiping down tables in her section, mentally calculating her tips for the night when she sensed someone approaching. She looked up to find Mr. Winters standing there, turning a business card between his fingers. "Ms. Chen," he said, "I have a proposition for you." Liz straightened, clutching her cleaning rag like a shield. "I'm not interested in propositions, Mr. Winters." A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "Not that kind of proposition. A professional one." He extended the business card. "Winters Production Group. We represent musicians across various genres, manage performance venues, and produce recordings." Liz didn't take the card. "I told you I don't play anymore. Tonight was an exception. An exception that proves you're wasting extraordinary talent," he replied. "I've heard thousands of pianists in my career. What you have can't be taught. It's innate. A rare quality that separates merely good players from artists." His words pulled at something deep inside her, a longing she'd tried to bury. But Liz had learned to be practical. Dreams didn't pay rent or medical bills. "Thank you for the compliment," she said, resuming her wiping. "But I have responsibilities that don't allow for detours." Mr. Winters leaned against the table she was cleaning, forcing her to stop again. "Your brother, I presume? You mentioned caring for him earlier." Liz tensed. "My family situation is private." "Of course," he said smoothly. "But I wonder if you've considered that your talent might actually be the solution to your financial concerns, rather than something you had to sacrifice." The thought had crossed her mind, especially during particularly difficult months when tips were poor and bills piled up. But the path from where she stood now back to a music career seemed impossibly long and uncertain. "It's not that simple," she said. "Even if I wanted to return to playing, I'm years out of practice. The classical music world is brutally competitive, and I've been away too long." Mr. Winters nodded thoughtfully. "The classical world, yes. But there are other avenues. Film scoring, session work, accompanying. Less glamorous, perhaps, than the concert stage, but steady work for someone with your abilities." He placed the card on the table. "Think about it. Call me if you're interested in discussing possibilities." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and I've arranged something with your manager. Consider it a birthday gift to myself." Before Liz could ask what he meant, he was walking away. She picked up the business card, running her thumb over the embossed lettering. Vincent Winters, CEO, an address in downtown Chicago, a phone number with a direct extension. She slipped the card into her pocket, trying to ignore the way her heart had sped up. False hope was dangerous. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. When Liz finally clocked out at 1 a.m, her feet aching and back stiff from the double shift, Mr. Romano called her into his office. He sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, expression unreadable. Chen, how long have you worked at Bellini's? 2 years next month, sir. He nodded slowly. 2 years, and I never knew I had a Juilliard pianist serving breadsticks. Liz shifted uncomfortably. Former Juilliard student. I didn't complete my degree. Still? He leaned forward. Mr. Winters was quite taken with your playing. He suggested, actually more than suggested, that we utilize your talents more effectively. A knot formed in Liz's stomach. What does that mean exactly? It means, Mr. Romano said, that effective immediately you'll be our house pianist on Thursday through Saturday nights. You'll play from 7 to 11 with appropriate breaks. We'll adjust your server shifts accordingly. Liz blinked, trying to process this sudden change. But I'm not prepared for that. And my tips as a server will be more than compensated for, he interrupted. Mr. Winters has personally guaranteed to cover the difference in your income, plus a bonus for the first 3 months. After that, we'll renegotiate based on customer response. He smiled tightly. Though after tonight's performance, I doubt customer response will be an issue. Liz felt as if the floor was tilting beneath her. In the space of a few hours, the careful separation she'd maintained between her past and present had completely collapsed. Do I have a choice? She asked quietly. Mr. Romano's smile faded. Of course you have a choice, Chen. You can accept this opportunity, which frankly seems like a significant improvement over carrying trays and dealing with demanding customers. Or you can continue as you were, and I'll tell Mr. Winters you declined his generous offer. He paused. Though I should mention he's one of our primary investors. Disappointing him would be unfortunate. The implied threat wasn't subtle. Liz understood what he wasn't saying. Refuse, and her job as a server might not be secure either. When would this start? She asked, her voice hollow. Tomorrow night. Tomorrow? But I haven't practiced. I don't have any music prepared. Mr. Winters seemed to think you would rise to the occasion. Mr. Romano stood, indicating the conversation was over. I've authorized an advance on your pay. Use it to buy whatever sheet music you need. And Chen? His expression softened slightly. This could be good for you. I've never seen someone look so alive as you did when you were playing tonight. Liz left the restaurant in a daze, the late-night streets of Chicago strangely quiet after the noise and chaos of her shift. The buses had stopped running, so she splurged on a rideshare, too exhausted to walk to the night bus stop. In the back seat of the car, she pulled out her phone and saw 3 missed calls from her brother and a text message. Where are you? Everything okay? She texted back quickly, on my way home. Long night. Tell you about it when I get there. Then, almost against her will, she took out Mr. Winters' business card again. The streetlights flashing past illuminated it in brief pulses, like the card itself was breathing. She remembered the feeling of the piano keys beneath her fingers, the way the music had flowed through her after the initial stiffness wore off. For 2 years, she'd been sleepwalking, going through the motions of survival without really living. Tonight, for a few minutes, she had woken up. The question was, could she bear to go back to sleep again? The car pulled up outside her apartment building. Liz paid the driver and stepped out, noticing a light still on in their window. Her brother was waiting up for her despite the late hour. As she climbed the stairs to their apartment, Liz realized she was humming again, not Chopin or Debussy this time, but a simple melody she'd composed years ago, during her first semester at Juilliard. She'd nearly forgotten it, but now it returned clear and insistent, asking to be remembered, to be completed. Liz found her brother asleep on the couch, his homework spread across the coffee table, a half-eaten sandwich on a plate beside him. The TV played quietly in the background, casting blue light across his sleeping face. For a moment, she just stood there watching him. At 16, he still looked so young when he slept, reminding her of the 10-year-old boy she'd practically raised during her parents' frequent business trips. Long before the accident made their arrangement permanent, she gently shook his shoulder. Hey, sleepyhead, go to bed. He stirred, blinking up at her. You're late, he mumbled. Everything okay? Yeah, she said, not sure how to explain what had happened. Just an unusual night. We'll talk tomorrow. Too tired to press further, he gathered his books and shuffled off to his bedroom. Liz cleared away his sandwich plate and turned off the TV. In the sudden quiet, the apartment felt different somehow, as if the walls had been listening to her play at Bellini's and were now holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Her gaze drifted to the upright piano against the living room wall. Before she could think better of it, she walked over and lifted the lid. Dust had settled on the keys, and when she pressed one experimentally, the note sounded slightly out of tune. Still, it was a better instrument than most people had in their homes, a Yamaha that her mother had saved for years to buy, insisting that Liz couldn't develop properly on an inferior piano. Sitting down on the bench, Liz placed her hands on the keys and began to play softly, mindful of the late hour and thin walls. She started with simple scales and arpeggios, reacquainting her fingers with the spacing of the keys, the pressure needed to produce different dynamics. It felt both strange and familiar, like speaking a language she'd once been fluent in but hadn't used in years. After a few minutes of technical exercises, she found herself playing the melody that had come to her in the car, her unfinished composition from Juilliard. It had been a homework assignment for her composition class. Write a piece that tells a story without words. Liz had begun composing something about hope and perseverance, but had abandoned it when her parents died and she'd had to leave school. Now, as she played the existing section, she could hear where it wanted to go next. Her fingers found the continuation of the melody, hesitant at first, then with growing confidence. The middle section emerged darker, more complex, filled with minor harmonies and suspended chords that captured the struggle of the past 2 years. And then, surprisingly, a resolution began to take shape, neither triumphant nor defeated, but honest, acknowledging pain while refusing to be defined by it. She was so absorbed in the music that she didn't notice her brother, standing in the doorway until he spoke. "You're playing again," he said simply. Liz's hand stilled on the keys. "Did I wake you?" "I'm sorry, No, it's fine." He came into the living room, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "It's just been so long." "What happened tonight?" Liz took a deep breath and told him everything. The missing pianist at Bellini's, Mr. Winter's demand, her reluctant performance, and the unexpected offer. As she spoke, her brother's expression shifted from surprise to excitement. "That's amazing, Liz. It's like something from a movie. You have to do it." She smiled at his enthusiasm. "It's not that simple. Being the restaurant pianist isn't exactly a career breakthrough. But it's a start, right? And this producer guy, Winters, he could help you get back into music for real." Liz shook her head. "I left that world behind for a reason." "We have bills, your school expenses." "Don't use me as an excuse," he interrupted, suddenly serious. "I never wanted you to give up Juilliard." "That was your decision," his words hit hard. Liz had always told herself she'd made the only possible choice after their parents' death. Leave school, find steady work, take care of her brother. But had there been other options she'd been too overwhelmed to see? "I just don't want you to be stuck waiting tables forever because of me," he continued. "Especially when you can do that." He gestured to the piano. "I've missed hearing you play. The apartment's been too quiet." Liz felt a lump forming in her throat. "I've missed it too," she admitted. "More than I realized." They talked for another hour, weighing possibilities and practicalities. By the time they both went to bed, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten, and Liz had made a decision. The next day she woke late, exhausted but strangely energized. After her brother left for school, she spent the morning cleaning the apartment, a task that usually felt like a chore but today seemed almost meditative. With each surface she wiped down or item she put away. Her mind was cataloging music, what to play that night, what she remembered well enough to perform without extensive practice, where her technique was rusty and needed work. In the afternoon, she visited a music store downtown, using the advance Mr. Romano had given her to buy sheet music. The shop owner, an elderly man with ink-stained fingers, helped her select pieces that would work well as background music, but still showcase her abilities. "Dinner crowd doesn't want avant-garde bar talk," he advised, sorting through stacks of music. "But they deserve better than heart and soul all night. Balance is key." Liz left with an armful of music books, some classical collections, some jazz standards, even some tastefully arranged pop songs. She spent the remainder of the afternoon at her piano, practicing until her fingers ached, rediscovering muscles that had grown slack from disuse. When she arrived at Bellini's that evening, 15 minutes before her new 7 o'clock start time, she found the restaurant already buzzing. Word had apparently spread about the waitress turned pianist. Several regular customers had requested tables near the piano, and there was an energy in the air that hadn't been there before. Mr. Romano met her at the door, more nervous than she'd ever seen him. "People have been calling all day asking about you," he told her. "Mr. Winters mentioned your performance to some industry friends. We're fully booked for the next 2 weeks." Liz felt a flutter of panic. "No pressure, right?" He squeezed her shoulder awkwardly. "Just do what you did last night, Chen. That's all we need." But last night had been pure emotion. Unplanned, raw, fueled by 2 years of suppressed passion. Could she recapture that magic when it was expected? When people were paying specifically to hear her? As she approached the piano, now positioned more prominently and adorned with a small vase of fresh flowers, she noticed several things had been added: a proper bench with an adjustable height, a glass of water on a coaster, a small reading lamp for the sheet music. Someone had taken care to prepare the space for a serious musician. Liz adjusted the bench, arranged her music, and flexed her fingers. The restaurant had quieted slightly, diners glancing over in anticipation. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. Then with a deep breath, she began to play. She started with something gentle, Satie's Gymnopédie No. 1, its simple, floating melody creating an atmosphere without demanding attention. As she played, she felt herself relaxing. This wasn't a concert hall with critical judges or competitive peers. These were people enjoying their meals, their conversations, their evenings out. The music was meant to enhance their experience, not dominate it. Over the next hour, Liz moved through her prepared repertoire: some Chopin nocturnes, a few jazz standards, a Gershwin piece. She kept the dynamics controlled, the tempo steady, creating a sophisticated backdrop to the dining experience. Occasionally, she would look up and catch someone listening intently. A fork paused midway to their mouth, or a conversation temporarily suspended as the music briefly took center stage in their awareness. During her first break, she stood to stretch her fingers and was surprised by a smattering of applause. A few diners raised their glasses to her. Penny, working the hostess stand, gave her a thumbs up. "They love you," she whispered as Liz passed on her way to get water. "And check out table 12. Liz glanced over to see Mr. Winters seated with several well-dressed companions. He nodded to her, his expression appreciative but evaluating. She nodded back, uncertain whether to approach or maintain distance. The decision was made for her when one of his companions, a tall, elegant woman with silver-streaked hair, stood and walked directly to her. "Ms. Chen, I'm Diane Powell, Artistic Director at the Chicago Symphony Center. Vincent told me I should hear you play." Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct. "We're holding auditions next month for our community outreach program. We need pianists who can perform in schools, retirement communities, community centers, bringing music to people who might not otherwise experience live classical performances." Liz tried to keep her expression neutral, despite the surge of excitement she felt. The Chicago Symphony was a prestigious institution. Their outreach program was known for discovering and nurturing new talent. "That sounds interesting," she said carefully. "It's paid work," Ms. Powell continued, "though not full-time initially, but it often leads to other opportunities: teaching, chamber music, eventually symphony work for those with the right combination of talent and dedication." She produced a card similar to Mr. Winters. "The audition details are on our website. I hope you'll consider it." As Liz returned to the piano for her second set, her mind was racing. One performance less than 24 hours ago, and suddenly doors were opening. Doors she'd believed were permanently closed. It felt almost like a dream, the kind she'd stopped allowing herself to have. 6 months passed in a blur of music, practice, and gradual transformation. Liz's life had found a new rhythm, still demanding, still challenging, but infused with purpose that had been missing for too long. Her nights at Bellini's had become something of a local attraction. What began as background music for diners evolved into an experience people sought out. Reservations for tables near the piano now needed to be made weeks in advance. Mr. Romano, always quick to capitalize on success, had printed new menus with live piano performance by Elizabeth Chen, formerly of Juilliard, emblazoned across the top. Liz had mixed feelings about her newfound mini-celebrity status. She appreciated the steady income, significantly better than what she'd made as a server, especially with tips, but sometimes missed the anonymity of carrying plates and taking orders. At the piano, she was visible, exposed. People watched her, not just listened. Some even recorded her playing on their phones, clips that occasionally found their way to social media. One such clip had caught the attention of a local news station, leading to a human interest story. From server to virtuoso, the waitress with hidden talent. The 3-minute segment had been viewed thousands of times online, bringing even more attention to Bellini's and to Liz herself. Her brother thought it was all fantastic. "You're practically famous," he teased one morning as they ate breakfast. He was in his final year of high school now, already accepted to the state university with a partial scholarship. "My friends keep asking if you're really my sister." Liz rolled her eyes, buttering a piece of toast. "Hardly famous. Just a restaurant pianist who got lucky." "Lucky?" He looked genuinely puzzled. "What happened wasn't luck, Liz. You worked insanely hard your whole life to be that good. Someone finally noticed, that's all." His perspective made her pause. She had worked hard. Thousands of hours of practice since childhood, sacrificing normal teenage activities for lessons and recitals. Perhaps what felt like luck was actually preparation meeting opportunity. As her old piano teacher used to say, after the audition Ms. Powell had mentioned that night at Bellini's, Liz had been accepted into the Chicago Symphony's community outreach program. Twice a week, she performed at schools, community centers, and retirement homes across the city. The pay was modest, but the experience proved invaluable, helping her rebuild her confidence and performance skills. Most importantly, the program connected her with other musicians, people who spoke her language, who understood the joy and discipline of a life dedicated to music. Some were seasoned professionals with decades of experience. Others were young, ambitious players just beginning their careers. Being among them helped Liz feel like she belonged somewhere again. One of these connections led to a part-time teaching position at a community music school on Chicago's North Side. 3 afternoons a week, Liz taught piano to students ranging from eager 5-year-olds to retirees finally pursuing long-deferred dreams. The work was both exhausting and rewarding, forcing her to articulate concepts she'd internalized long ago. "Hand position, Alexandra." She gently corrected a young student during a lesson. "Remember, we want to keep our wrists level and fingers curved like you're holding a small ball." The girl adjusted her hands, her tongue poking out in concentration as she tried again. When she successfully played the passage, her face lit up with pride. "I did it!" "Yes, you did," Liz affirmed, feeling a warmth that rivaled what she experienced during her own performances. "That's exactly right. These small victories, a student mastering a difficult passage, an elderly audience member approaching with tears after a performance, a moment of perfect communication through music, accumulated over the months, filling spaces inside her that had been empty for too long." Mr. Winters kept in touch, occasionally stopping by Bellini's or calling with potential opportunities. Some she accepted, like recording piano tracks for a documentary film score. Others she declined, not yet ready for touring or major commercial projects that would take her away from her brother's final year at home. Life wasn't perfect. The apartment was still small, bills still needed to be paid, and some days Liz felt the heavy weight of responsibility as keenly as ever. But music had reintroduced color to a world that had faded to gray after her parents' death. She was playing again, not just surviving. On a crisp autumn evening, almost exactly 6 months after that first unexpected performance, Liz arrived at Bellini's to find a handwritten note propped against the piano. "Ms. Chen," it read in Mr. Romano's distinctive scrawl, "private event tonight in the back room. Client specifically requested you perform after dinner, around 9 p.m. Regular dining room duties until then. Romano." Liz felt a twinge of annoyance. She'd grown accustomed to her regular schedule and repertoire. Private events often meant demanding clients with specific requests, sometimes for pieces she didn't know well. The evening proceeded normally until just before 9, when Mr. Romano appeared at her elbow as she finished a Schubert impromptu. "They're ready for you," he said, unusually solemn. "The back room. What should I play?" Liz asked, gathering her sheet music. "Did they make any requests?" "They said you would know," he replied cryptically, then added, "This is important, Chen, very important." Curious now, Liz made her way to the private dining room. As she approached, she heard the murmur of conversation and the clink of glasses. She knocked lightly on the partially open door. "Ah, here she is," called a familiar voice. Mr. Winters stood as she entered, gesturing her forward. "Ladies and gentlemen, the musician I've been telling you about." Liz scanned the room, suddenly nervous. Around the large table sat about a dozen people, all watching her with interest. She recognized Ms. Powell from the Symphony Center. The others were strangers, though something about them, their attentive posture, the way they studied her, suggested they were people who took music seriously. "Elizabeth," Mr. Winters said, using her full name, "thank you for joining us. I hope you don't mind the mystery, but I wanted this to be a surprise." "A surprise?" Liz echoed, confused. "Yes." He smiled, looking pleased with himself. "You see, seated around this table are the board members of the Chicago Music Foundation. Every year, they select one exceptional musician who has overcome significant obstacles to receive their fellowship, a substantial grant to further their musical education and career." Liz's heart began to pound. She knew of this fellowship. It was prestigious, competitive, and life-changing for recipients. Normally, candidates submit extensive applications and perform in a formal audition setting, Mr. Winters continued. But after seeing that news segment about you, the board became interested in your unusual journey. They've been following your work these past months, at Bellini's with the outreach program teaching. Tonight they'd like to hear you play, not as background entertainment but as an artist. The room fell silent. Liz looked from face to face, reading expectation, curiosity, and what appeared to be genuine interest. Her mouth felt dry. "What would you like me to play?" she asked. An older man with kind eyes spoke up. "Whatever moves you most, Ms. Chen. We want to hear your voice as a musician." Liz nodded, moving to the baby grand in the corner of the room. As she sat down, adjusting the bench, she considered her options. She could play something technically impressive, a listitude perhaps, or a challenging Beethoven sonata movement. But as her fingers touched the keys, she made a different choice. She began to play her own composition, the piece she'd started at Juilliard and finally completed over these past months. It wasn't technically perfect. It wouldn't dazzle like the virtuosic pieces she'd learned years ago, but it was honest, born from her own experience of loss, struggle, and rediscovered hope. As the final notes faded, she kept her hands on the keys, eyes closed, feeling strangely peaceful regardless of their judgment. When she finally looked up, she saw something unexpected on the faces watching her. Not just approval, but recognition. The kind that comes when people have glimpsed something authentic. The applause that followed was warm, genuine. Ms. Powell wiped a tear from her cheek. The kind-eyed man nodded slowly as if confirming something to himself. Mr. Winters approached the piano. "That was your own composition?" Liz nodded. "I started it before I left school. Finished it recently." "It tells your story," he said simply. It wasn't a question. "I suppose it does." Later that night, after discussions and questions and a formal invitation to apply for the fellowship, Liz walked home instead of taking the bus. The city air was cool against her face, stars barely visible above the Chicago lights. She felt lighter somehow, as if a chapter was ending and a new one beginning. Her phone buzzed with a text from her brother. "How was work?" Liz smiled, typing back, "Life-changing. Again. I'll tell you when I get home." She put the phone away and continued walking, humming softly to herself. The melody was new, not yet written down. The beginning of another composition, another story. This one about rebuilding, about finding your way back to yourself after being lost, about how sometimes the very thing you think you've left behind forever is exactly what you need to move forward.